Whatever my hand finds to do, I don't really care what, I'll do it with all my might. That's Ecclesiastes 9 verse 10. Very good principle that. So in this connection then, it's very important, even vital, what you think about the church. That's why Paul in 1 Timothy chapter 3, after dealing with the qualifications of elders and deacons, says this, verse 15, "This is how you ought to behave yourself in the house of God, where he dwells, which is the church of the living God, which is the pillar and ground of the truth," the sole institution in all the world that holds up the truth for public proclamation around the globe. Think that about the church and you'll say, "I'm willing to serve in whatever sphere, and it will be an honour to work for the cause of the kingdom and the cause of Christ." It's striking too that other passage which I've quoted before, 1 Peter 5, which deals with the office of elder and the right desire for the office of elder, refers to the church as, quote, "the flock of God," God's own little flock of sheep that he cares for, and that the good shepherd laid down his life for. I'm going to do things for that church because I believe that about it. It calls it God's heritage, this precious inheritance that God, as it were, has given to himself, the church. The right motivation is doing things for Christ's sake and for the sake of the church, which means thirdly, for the members' sake. Members' sake. Not only the church in some abstract but lawful and proper sense, but also for the concrete members of the church. I want to help my brothers and sisters and the covenant children in the congregation. I'm doing this, as Psalm 122 puts it, for my friends and brethren's sakes. So I pray and work that peace may be in Jerusalem. We sang that Psalm 122 earlier. So I'm willing to make sacrifices to do this because I love them. I don't run them down, I don't despise them, but I love them. And we could say, because this is a valid and proper motivation too, I want to be an elder or a member of the council for the sake of the reward. That's lawful. The Bible often holds out to us the prospect of reward. It's not the main thing, but it's there. 1 Timothy 3 verse 13. "They that have used the office of a deacon well purchase to themselves a good degree, good standing, and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus." That deals with a deacon. The same principle applies also to elders and ministers. And Reverend Rodney Klein had a sermon on this a few years ago on the audio page of our website. And now, we saw the wrong motivation for obtaining the office of elder and some of the wrong ways of obtaining it that flow from it. Well, having seen the right motivation for seeking church office, especially that of elder, with that flows the appropriate and right way of seeking it. And in general, if you want it in one sentence, the right way of seeking the office of elder is to prepare yourself by growth in the graces which are the qualifications for office. Very simple. That's the thrust and argument of this chapter. To seek office in the right way is to prepare yourself by growth in the graces which are set forth here as the qualifications in verses 2 through 7. The office is that of elder, but it's not simply a matter of age. The office is called that of elder because ordinarily with age comes wisdom and experience, but of course not always. There's a famous saying, the worst fool is the old fool. Well, not always, but in general it does. If it were the case that those were to be elected elders who were the oldest, well, it wouldn't be too hard to have an election. There wouldn't be much need to bother too much about it. You just pick who is the oldest. Have the men bring into church their birth certificates, and then just, oh, here we are, that one's born in 1932. He beats the guy who's born in 1936. He's the first elder. It doesn't work like that. The idea of elder is that of maturity and spiritual maturity. That's the key. That's why verses 2 through 7 deal with qualifications which bespeak spiritual maturity in these graces. Verse 2, for instance, a bishop or overseer must be blameless for obvious reasons. He must be the husband of one wife. That is, he cannot be a polygamist. He must be vigilant and sober. That is, temperate and sober-minded. He's going to have to deal with some problems in the congregation. He needs, amongst other things, to keep his head. He needs to be of good behaviour, given to hospitality. He needs to be apt to teach. As a minister, preach the word, teaching elder, and as an elder, to explain the scriptures that is appropriate to his office in admonishing and exercising church discipline. Not given to wine. Boy, you can't have an elder who's a drunkard. No striker nor brawler. Can't have a man who's in taverns fighting people. Not greedy of filthy lucre or covetous. He's always hungry after money. Maybe someday he'll steal from the church's offerings, but patient. Then verses 4 to 5 refer to the management of one's own household. One that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. And then comes this devastatingly simple argument, that if a man can't rule his own house, how in all the wide world is he going to rule the church of God, which is a much grander and more difficult thing to govern. And that reference to ruling your own house does not mean that you go around bossing your wife so that she's some sort of a slave and does your bidding all the time, or that your will is done in your house as God's will is done in heaven. Ruling your own house means that the household is governed, the wife and children, under God's will. Ruling the house has to do not with your will, sinful, weak and foolish sometimes, but with God's will. So that you and your wife and your family serve Jesus Christ. Ruling your house means that you and your wife and your family serve his body, which is the church. So that Christ rules in the house, not the ego of the father and husband. And then verse 6, not a novice. Another reference to spiritual maturity. Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride he fall into the condemnation of the devil. You can't have someone as an elder, or a deacon for that matter, who is relatively new. Someone learning the ropes of the Christian faith. Someone learning the ropes of the distinctive and developed Reformed faith. Someone learning the ropes of this church and its ways. Not a novice. Because novices, by definition, are not thoroughly grounded and settled. Too much up and down, too much oscillation. So the person doesn't yet know properly what it is to behave in the house of God. Verse 15. So the worst thing you could do with a new convert is to put him in church office too early. It can take years for people foolishly put in church office too early. Years, even decades, to recover from this. Verse 6 talks about pride. Not novice, lest being lifted up with pride he fall into the condemnation of the devil, and it can take years to get him out of this because